Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of the Clown Fiesta podcast with your hosts Blue Jay and JNT250. Pretty spicy games over the weekend. It seems like we get that on a regular basis now, something that I'm pretty damn happy about, and I'm sure all of you are as well. This week, we're going to jump into obviously predictions of the upcoming LCS week, but first, we got to do a little bit of recap because there were some pretty crazy games over the past weekend. Before we get into that, Immortals making a little bit of news today, deciding they're going to let go of a few players. JNT, are you there?
I was expecting you to say some more, but okay.
I thought you were going to pull up a
Oh,
little
true,
thing there.
true.
Anyways, they're
We're off
not
to a good
yet.
start here.
So they are not bringing back everyone. They are letting go of Altec, Gate, Soaz, and Aka. This not really a huge surprise. Oh, and they also are getting rid of one of their coaches, Go to One. I don't. Obviously, I can't really say I've ever really heard of him. Um, but yeah, definitely a good sign for Immortals fans. I don't think this is a big surprise to a lot of people. We didn't we didn't see a lot of success when it was this lineup playing in the LCS. However, I wouldn't say we saw a whole lot of success with the other roster either. So it makes you kind of gotta wonder, what are you keeping everybody else for? You know, you're keeping Apollo, you're keeping Hakuho, you're keeping Xmithy, you're keeping basically all of your what was LCS roster by the end of the season, Alorum and Insanity as well. So I wonder what their plans are with these players. I don't imagine they're all going to stay with the LCS team. It wouldn't surprise me if some of them are back in Academy and Immortals goes for some better players. But give me some of your quick thoughts on the roster moves that Immortals made today.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think people were surprised when this first got announced. Obviously the initial roster that got put in for Week One LCS for this Immortal squad being Soaz, Potluck, Ica, Altec, and Gate. People were kind of surprised, and everyone was really kind of in shock that their entire LCS roster had been benched, and obviously with the poor performances, like I said, I don't think anybody saw this coming, and especially when they let go of Zabutin midway through the season, it didn't seem like they were going to hold on to the French duo of Soaz and Aka. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of these guys potentially get picked up by academy teams. I think Altec and Gate, they're like solid academy players. I don't think they're quite LCS level talent. Altec maybe he Altec I would probably consider like a bottom tier LCS
He's
AD
shown
carry.
some success in
Yeah,
the
like
LCS, right? Like
he's
he's
had
not,
good showings
yeah,
on some decent teams. I remember
right.
when Echo Fox had a pretty decent split back in season 8 when they had Huni and Dardoch. He was on that team. They were all right. He played on. I don't know, he played on.
Didn't he play for Dig at one point? I
He
think
played
he's
for.
been around anyways. He's
He's
been
been
on
on
a
a
lot of
lot of
teams.
teams. A bit of a journeyman sort of. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Altec and Gate back in academy. But in terms of Ika and Soaz, Soaz, he made like a little twit longer about his experience so far, NNA, especially with the whole quarantining period and how that like really took a toll on him, and that he
Yeah.
plans to potentially move into a coaching role or is kind of like deciding his future, whether or not he wants to be a player or a coach and whatnot. And with Ika, he kind of just got like brought like into Immortals through Zabatine. So no surprise with new staff and new coaching staff potentially coming in that he's not sticking around.
Yeah, and that's the most important, well, not the most important, but the most interesting one is the Soaz one because I think that's where people were looking at. Look, this guy's still got a little bit of a little bit in the tank, and he's kind of deciding to go the coaching route. And he said maybe he'll want to play in 2022 or something. But it is very difficult to make a comeback, and so you really do have to wonder where he's looking to go. It has to be Europe. Most people would assume. I don't think he had a good time in North America, and then Aka, you got to feel bad for Aka because this could be the end of his career. Honestly, it would not surprise me. He had been in Europe for quite a while, playing for I don't know if it's always been called EU Masters, but playing in whatever the EU Masters equivalent would be.
The
And
national
now you
leagues,
come,
pretty much. That's
and now you come to North America and you don't see any success over here. Some people would say that now he's had his shot, for sure. And well, he didn't really do much with it, so a little bit unfortunate there. But I'm glad to see that Immortals is making some moves, and wish all of those guys nothing but the best. But let's move on. Because well, actually, no. One quick thing I do want to mention is that there was uh, some I don't know interest. What there was some speculation, let's say, that the plan is to build a team around Xfinity now on Twitter. That was where I was seeing all the speculation, and that to me seems like a solid plan. Like if you have Xfinity locked up, I think that that's a good place to start. And so it looks like they'll probably try to build pieces around him.
Yeah, I mean
But
everyone's still of the opinion that Xmith is a great player, so there's no surprise that, you want to build around your best player.
yeah, and he's very much in maybe not so much as the same skill level as Soaz, but in that like this guy's still got some left in the tank kind of thing. But other than that, not really too much to say about it. Now let's move on to Cloud9 versus TSM over the weekend. This was the Saturday game, and well, we had TSM coming out on top, 3-1 in the series. Give me some of your thoughts on this one, JNT.
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting series for the most part. I think people were coming in with the expectations, I think overall, that C9 was gonna bounce back. We mentioned last week their rough series against FlyQuest, and then they looked all right. They had some good, some bad versus EG, and people were kind of expecting C9 to be able to get back on track with another week of practice and scrims. But honestly, all in all, it didn't really pan out. We kind of saw the same exact C9 that we saw in the previous week of playoffs. You know, the good with the bad, their ability to just potentially mechanically outplay you in fights, but also their their over eagerness and their over willingness to like take fights and not have proper setup for these fights. Have some different views on the current meta and draft with like banning Caitlyn and Shen on blue side when these are like two champions that are super high priority right now, especially in North America. And it was really, C9 underperforming, but TSM really stepping up and showing up. I think all across the board, I think a lot of the players on TSM had really good performances. The ones I really want to point out are Bjergsen, Broken Blade, and Biofrost. I think all three of those guys, they had a really great series. Broken Blade was doing really well with the resources and the counter picks that he was given. Bjergsen, kind of just smurfing it as usual. He's been really on the uptick for the last about a month and a half now. He got the zillion in game four. He had a really good Twisted Fate in what was it, game two or game three?
I think he had 2 games of TF.
Yeah, I think he had TF in game two and game three. But Bjergsen showing up like normal, and Biofrost had a really great series. I thought his recon play was super super good. Had a lot of clutch Ws and ultimates, and coming in, being able to shield and peel for the team, and TSM really stepping up to the plate and deserving of their world spot.
Yeah, no, I really like when you specifically highlight Biofrost, and don't get me wrong, I think Bjergsen should obviously be highlighted as well. That guy is so clutch and so good, but like everyone is always going to point out when Bjergsen is good, and so we saw a lot of that over Twitter. Like he was actually great, but so was Bio, and like you said, really, really, you know what? He was just reliable. He was reliable on engage. He was reliable on peel. Like you could get just about anything that you wanted out of a support in that game or in that series, pardon me, from Bio. And so I'm really really happy to see him stepping up because we have to remember it's not long ago that this guy was benched, right? He just literally came back in the middle of playoffs to step back in, and you really get putting a lot of weight on someone's shoulders when this is a guy that hasn't been practicing with the team for more than just a couple of weeks or something like that. So really, really happy with his performance. But again, I do need to highlight Bjergsen because this guy was a monster. And it's not even a surprise anymore, right? Like, this is what you come to expect from Bjergsen. He had a 15, 4, and 25 score line across the series, and his TF and his ear play were just amazing.
Pretty disgusting out of him. Yeah, I just think overall in this series, not to like skip ahead to like ending thoughts, but overall in this series, it really seemed that TSM was more well prepared and executed a lot better on what they wanted to do within the game. I think that kind of especially showed in game one. Game one,
Yeah.
C9 looked pretty out of sorts with the Galio mid pick and using that champion as a flanker instead of as an engager. Niski seemed to be really like ahead of his team in a lot of the fights. We saw in like countless fights that he was, about 3 or 4 seconds ahead of his team, like flash Wing in with the Predator Galio. I know we discussed Predator Galio a couple weeks ago when EG was playing and how it seemed like a bit of a weird rune to take on Galio, and who knows, maybe that's the correct rune to be taking. But it really didn't seem to work. C9's utilization of the Galio in that game, and I just think overall, like TSM, they look like the better team. They look like the cleaner team. And it's pretty disappointing from the C9 side just to see this team have like such a huge fall from grace. If you were to tell me midway through this season when Cloud9 was 9-0 that they one wouldn't make it to Worlds, or two they wouldn't look like a top three team in the region, and three that they would have like a terrible overall match record in the second half, I would have called you crazy. But
Yeah.
C9, I don't know. It's really hard to look from the outside in and try to understand and like pick apart the problems in this team, but it's just a huge collapse. Like they look like the fifth best team by the end of the playoffs. I mean,
Yeah.
TL, FlyQuest, TSM all better. Golden Guardians looked better than C9. I think they put up a much better fight against TSM than
If Golden
Cloud9
Guardians
did.
is playing C9 in a best of five, I'm taking Golden Guardians.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It just
Um.
go ahead.
Sorry. I liked how you talked about the prep because to me it seemed very clear that TSM was more prepped for this series. It looked like they knew exactly what they were doing. You mentioned game one. They knew exactly what they were doing against that Galio. They had all range champions, so they didn't have to commit too far in. Every time you could tell so often Biofrost would go in, get the engage, force the Galio ult, and just jump right back out on that Recon. It was perfect. It was exactly what TSM wanted to do. They draw at the Galio ult, and it got to the point where Cloud9 looked like they didn't know what they wanted to do anymore. Now you have Cloud9 trying to TP flank with the Galio, which is just not what your comp is designed to do. There's the reason you're drafting this set first, which I mean you and I have gone back and forth on this so often about how we don't like the picking set so early in the draft, and it shouldn't be that prioritized if you're not able to show much success with it. Well, this was one of those games where like they got hard punished for not being able to utilize the set. I don't mind the set in lane. I thought it was even. In fact, I think set is great in lane. Even with the counter pick of the Lucian, Licorice was doing just fine in that lane. But when it came time to get the engages off, they could not get the set ulti into the Galio ulti combo to save their freaking lives. Like it just wasn't happening, and you could tell TSM was just dancing around them. Not even just in game one, but specifically with that combo, but and all series long, TSM was just more prepped, and I really felt like it was clear from game one that C9 was not going to win this series. Even though they did take a game, it just felt like they weren't on.
Yeah, I just want to jump back to the set pick a little bit because as we both mentioned, we don't like blind picking the set first. And I think one of the what makes this champion so powerful is its ability to be flexed into three different roles. We've seen plenty of set top, jungle, and support. And I was pretty surprised to see,
And mid.
yeah, and mid. Honestly, I have four roles, I guess.
Yeah.
A little bit less on set mid, but definitely high priority
Right.
for top, jungle, and support. But in terms of, C9's prioritization of set, I found it pretty interesting because, I feel like two of the teams that are able to utilize set the best in NA right now are FlyQuest and Golden Guardians, partially because they have three players, more so Golden Guardians than FlyQuest, that are able to play this champion at a high level and, being able to use it as a large flex pick. I mean, we've seen set, Blabber play set. I think he played one or two games of it in the regular season. Didn't look very good on it. It's honestly not a Blabber style of champion, and we've never seen Vulcan play it. So I think the champion loses a lot of its power when you're not able to flex it into these multiple roles. Like when Golden Guardians is picking set, like they have confidence in picking set on like red side 1-2 and being able to flex it either top jungle or support. I think Set has been one of Closer's best champions. Set has been one of Huhi's best champions. And on the FlyQuest side, Solo and Santorin pretty much will always take set if they can get it into a decent matchup or into a good team comp. And
They've both shown they can play
yeah,
it.
exactly. And with C9's, over I would say over prioritization of it, picking it blue side first pick in two separate occasions, they don't have that ability to be able to throw it into the jungle or into support, and it pretty much just gives Broken Blade free reign of counterpick, and you're basically getting red side with double counterpick, as they're going to counterpick for Bjergsen mid and they're going to counterpick for Broken Blade.
Yeah. And just some other things I want to touch on before we move on, because I do want to talk a little bit about Licorice and Sven in this series. For me, I thought Licorice. Um, I remember mentioning this, or maybe just thinking it at least when watching the games, that he's starting to get that Huni effect. And what I mean by that is he's very aggro without, and it's kind of coin flippy, because you should be able to be aggressive in lane with knowing where the enemy jungler is. Now, I want to be clear, because that could be a result of Blabber struggling right now as well, and just the whole team, honestly, in general, because being able to track the enemy jungler is a team thing. You need to be able to do that as a team. And so many times did Licorice get ganked in this series and went down so often. I wasn't counting his deaths, but I do know that a lot of them were in lane to just ganks, just because he's playing aggressive and getting punished. You need to have wards down or to be able to track the enemy jungler, and that just wasn't happening. So I was watching this game and I was just thinking a lot about Huni when I was watching Licorice play, which is not a good sign, because we have seen Huni on the decline for some time now. As well as Sven, I wanted to talk about a little bit, because we heard so much on broadcast that Sven shouldn't pick Ezreal and his Ezreal is bad. Um, I think that there's a little bit of a misconception about Sven's Ezreal. I do not think the pick is necessarily bad. If the argument is that he should be playing something else like Senna or Ashe or Caitlyn, I'm totally right there with you. But I actually thought that his Ezreal was okay. Not anything amazing, but okay. And I think that because they kept losing with the Ezreal, people were so focused on that. But I don't think it matters what champion you're playing when your jungle and mid are kind of running it down, or and top, honestly. I don't think that Ezreal really mattered in those games. I thought that there was bigger problems in those losses.
Yeah, I mean, when we were watching the games, like I was getting pretty annoyed, honestly, with the amount of commentary that was going on about Sven's Ezreal. Like we discussed this previously when Cloud9 was playing FlyQuest and with Sven and Vulcan playing the Ezreal Yumi, and they looked great on it. And
Yeah,
primarily, the series was lost due to Cloud9's mid jungle. And even in this scenario, I think Sven and Vulcan had a pretty solid series overall.
totally
For
agree.
the most part, they held down Doublelift, and they did their job, and it was kind of other areas around the map which sort of failed them. But countless times we'd heard on this broadcast, if ever C9 got into a losing position while picking Ezreal, they would be like, "Why is Sven picking Ezreal? He's like, this isn't his champion. He needs to be put on some sort of other champion." And obviously, it's some kind of like results based analysis there. Like C9 loses Sven's playing Ezreal, he shouldn't be playing the champion, and I really don't agree with that kind of mindset because I think when you actually look at the games and what he's kind of accomplishing on this champion is, he's actually getting CS leads when he's playing this champion. He's able to control his lane. He's able to impact team fights.
He's
And
great
so,
in team
yeah,
fights.
I know. I just think he's so. I know we talked about this a little bit last week with FBI and having an int moment and people constantly bringing that up. But there's just the meme around Sven's Ezreal where he like randomly ints, and yes, he did that one time in game one where he's face checking Baron. But I it's just a
That play
little.
didn't even really bother me, honestly,
Yeah,
because
they had no vision
you
around
have to
Baron.
check
You
it
got
at
to
some
face
point.
check it at some point. I
Yeah,
agree.
you can't. So to me, I think that that play looked a lot worse than it actually was. You have to take a risk. You're about to give up Baron. You're already behind in the game. When you're behind like that, you can't just lay down and die. That is the classic CLG, and you can't do that. So I don't mind teams going for broke. We even saw, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but we saw FlyQuest do it in game two in the series against TL. Like, they were losing the game, but they didn't stop going for plays and they didn't stop taking risks. And that to me felt a lot of what I saw in Sven there in that particular face check. Maybe not the player you want face checking, but someone has to face check. You got to get in there. You can't just give Baron. So benefit of the doubt for that one on me. But yeah, definitely not the same Cloud9 that we saw. And like, it is unbelievable to see the kind of collapse that this team has taken. Is there anything else you want to talk about from the TSM side before we talk specifically just about C9?
Yeah, I think, TSM, like we just mentioned previously, like their game plan going into the series was really, really good. Their preparation, especially in terms of the draft, I think, you know, TSM threw a lot of curveballs at C9 in terms of drafting. With the Lucian counter pick, both times that C9 ended up first picking the set, they whipped out the Evelynn in what was it, game
Yeah.
three. against C9,
I think so.
and then in turn picking Skarner as a counter pick into Evelyn in game four, and really just being able to shut down that pick entirely when C9 really wasn't able to deal with it in the previous game. And there's not much more to
And the
say.
Zillion too.
Yeah,
And the
there's
Zillion. No,
yeah,
but
oh
your point is
one
really
thing I
valid.
had here is I think specifically in the draft of that game, I think it's really bad to leave up Bjergsen Zillion. They opted to ban both the LeBlanc and the Syndra, and leaving up Zillion when you have two aggressive and all-in kind of champions like Lucian and Evelynn, I think you have to ban that champion in that
Yeah.
case scenario because it completely counters the entirety of what Evelynn and Lucian want to do, which is go in, kill a target, and get out. And we saw in that game that Niski and Blabber were pretty much useless in terms of being able to
Yeah.
get in, kill their targets, and get out.
Yeah, no, your point is totally valid about the prep specifically. This was another example, whereas you could tell TSM knew how to play with and against the Evelyn, and you couldn't say the same thing for C9 uh, because they left up the Zillion and the Skarner. The Skarner, I'm not, like okay, it's hard to predict some of these champions that don't get a lot of play, but everyone in the world knows Bjergsen can whip out Zillion at any time, and that to me feels like a little bit of lack of preparation, or at least maybe they felt, you know what, doesn't matter, we could still one shot someone, or maybe we can, with the threat of Evelyn, force out the Zillion ulti too early. I don't know exactly what their thought process was, but clearly TSM knew what they wanted to do in this series, and we saw that all series long.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Golden Guardians had a little bit of the blueprint there, and like you need to ban this champion. And the one time they left it up was the game five they lost against TSM. So
And that's the
ban
thing
that
too, right?
champion, please.
We've seen so many, like, okay, TSM, I think there was a Reddit post today saying that TSM is guaranteed to play at least as many games as they did in the regular season, because they're going to have a 3 games, or at least 3 games in their upcoming set, which I guess that they've already played 15. But anyways, my point of bringing this up is we've seen a lot of TSM games just within the last 3 weeks or so. You should know by now, like, what you're going to get punished by, and if it hasn't been made clear, the Zillion is it. Like, unreal how good this guy is on Zillion, and you got to give him so much credit. He's looking so good. I can go on for days about how clutch he is, but I've said enough about it already. Really, really good. And another thing TSM did in this series, and you and I talked about this last week, was we wanted to see Broken Blade get the advantage, the counter pick, so to speak, in the top lane, and they managed to get that all series long. I think he had 3 Lucian games. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But he was on Lucian a lot, and the Jace in the one game
He
too,
had
and
two
he
Lucian
looked great.
games, I think,
Okay, my point is he had at least 2 Lucian games, and then the Jace game.
and he had a
He was
Shen game.
winning all of his lanes. He was winning all of his lanes, and so really, really happy with TSM getting that those matchups that Broken Blade really needs to shine, and we saw that happen in this series.
Yeah.
Um,
One thing I remember mentioning last week was that, Licorice, one of the pretty much the only top laner that he really ever has trouble with is Broken Blade because of his willingness to pick
you
these aggressive counterpick champions. And, credit to Broken Blade and TSM for doing that because they really managed to shut Licorice down.
Yeah, and I honestly felt Licorice was fine in lane, but it was where he couldn't get the engages off on the set where I really hurt for me his performance. That's where it was lacking the most. But let's talk a little bit more about C9 specifically, because now this team is gone, and it is, like you mentioned earlier, it is unbelievable to see how far this team has fallen from the 17-1 spring, from the 9-0 start to this split. uh, is this now the biggest collapse in LCS history? Are we calling it that?
Yeah, I think it is. The only other one you could really compare it to was Immortals back in season six. They had a 33 and 3 record in regular season, both in spring and summer. Ended up faltering in both playoffs. I remember they lost to TSM 3-0 in the spring playoffs, and they lost in the summer playoffs to C9 two times, once in the playoffs before the finals, and then once in the gauntlet to go to Worlds. And, up until then, we'd never really seen another team be so dominant in the regular season and, and end up collapsing like that. And looking at the C9 roster going 17-1 in spring, winning this split, they start off 9-0. People are wondering if this is the perfect split. And everyone was kind of had C9 as a lock as NA's number one seed, and that they were so ahead of the curve from everybody else. And then, like we said, we're sitting here today, and they look like the fifth best team in playoffs. And
Yeah.
you really got to wonder like how the C9 offseason is going to go.
Yeah, like everyone was so there was talk about if we couldn't or if we had to have the teams that go to Worlds um quarantine just so that they could do a Worlds, should we
Yeah,
just send
send C9
C9
early.
automatic?
Like,
Like, and that was something Travis Gafford brought up and he's getting a lot of flack for that now, but I think that was a totally warranted thought. I don't think it was a totally warranted idea, or I mean rather like something that you could actually do. I don't think that that's realistic, but the thought is valid because you're thinking, look, this team is so good. What a shame it would be to not see this team on the world stage. And well, this team that was so good is honestly just bad now. It's crazy to say, but they're actually just bad. And I don't know what happens in the offseason now. If you're the GM for C9, are you looking to make moves? I don't want to be the C9 GM right now because I have no idea. Like, how could you just give up Blabber and Niski? They were so good, but how could you keep going with them when they're so bad? This is an absolute headache if you're in the C9 org. And I think that they're going to have to get together as a group and figure out exactly what went wrong and if there is a fix to this. Because if there's not, then you have to make moves and you have to come back with something different next year.
yeah, it kind of the question is, if C9 is going to make any moves, and if so, like, what are the players you're going to get in return? Because, are you going to find another player like Niski who kind of mirrors the sort of Doinby strategy of shove and roam and play not for himself but play for the team? Or maybe they go back to more of like a traditional control mage player and, if for whatever reason they wanted to make a move at jungle, if they feel that, Blabber's he's too aggressive and they need, someone with more stability, you really got to wonder how that's overall going to affect C9 and their gameplay moving on. And if there were to be changes made, they're definitely not going to be considered a top. Not maybe they won't be considered a top team, but they're not going to be as aggressive as in the past. And we'll have to see how the meta develops in terms of going into the next season. But like you said, it'd be pretty difficult to be the GM of C9 right now because I think you got a lot of tough questions coming up.
Well, and it matters what players are available, right? Because
Yeah,
maybe there's not even a chance to find an upgrade. Like we know how important resident players are in North America, and well, C9 technically already has two. Well, not technically, they do already have two imports, and so if you're looking to get another import, I think it would mean Niski would have to go because I don't think you're getting rid of Sven. And speaking of Sven, I think I mean this thing. Let's be honest, this stings for everyone, this whole collapse, but it stings a lot more for Sven, I think,
yeah,
having lost to the team that he couldn't make it to Worlds with, and now TSM is going to Worlds. Sven having been there the last 2 years, this has to be absolutely crushing. We know that him and Vulcan were so try hard before the season started. They went to Korea to boot camp early. They put in all of this work, not even to go to Worlds, and so I really, really feel bad for the bot lane that did put in the extra time and that got to work a lot earlier than other players and teams. Really feels bad for them. And the last question I have about C9 moving forward is Reaper going to come back? And I know that's going to sound like a weird question to a lot of people. They're going to be like, "Where is this coming from?" And this is very high rated on the speculation meters, if you will. Um, but I remember last year, this is going way back, one of Reaper's vlogs on his YouTube channel. I don't remember his exact wording, so just understand that I am paraphrasing here. But he said something along the lines of he wasn't sure if he was going to come back and Jack convinced him to come back. Now, I don't remember if it was Jack convinced him to come back for one more year or just Jack convinced him to come back and that's it, period. But I did get the sense that Reaper was a little bit burnt out from doing what he was doing. Again, very high on the speculation meters here, but it would not surprise me if Reaper kind of says, you know what, I've had enough, or I'm looking for a break, or I'm looking for a change. Totally possible. You have to imagine with how like let's be honest, this guy's gotten so many coaching of the split or year awards. This is a guy that so many teams will want. So if he is looking for just a change and he just wants to go to a new team or a new region, this guy can demand a pretty penny. So he's going to get offered some pretty fat stacks, if you will. Again, completely speculatory though. Don't know. Maybe he would love to come back, and maybe we do see Reaper back with this team next year. But really sad to see what we all thought, and as North American fans, what we all thought was maybe one of our best chances ever to rep NA at Worlds, just collapse into what is just maybe the most disappointing performance from any LCS team ever.
Yeah.
Anything else on C9 before we move on?
Now I'm sad. Move on.
Yeah. Honestly, I think even if you don't like C9 as an NA fan, you have to be a little disappointed because really seemed like the opportunity to send a real contender to Worlds, but it ain't going to happen this year. So let's talk about a couple of teams that are going to go uh, to Worlds guaranteed because the next day on Sunday, we saw an absolute banger of a series. TL and FlyQuest go in the distance, go into 5 games. I freaking loved this series. I don't know where to start, so I'll let you start us off. What a good series, though.
Yeah, this was a really great series, just overall in terms of drafting, the way both teams played. I think both teams played pretty well overall for the most part. I think all the players were performing at a pretty high level. I don't think I can't pick out a player in particular that had a quote unquote bad series. I think everyone was playing well. Everyone was pretty on form. We saw a lot of like just huge carries from specific players in many games. A few that stand out are PoE and Tactical. I think both of those players had really insane series. For their teams. Tactical making that game-winning play in game four was saving the game with his Callista
Was
in the base.
huge, baby.
Yeah, that guy was going in. I had a really nice, just the way he played it mechanically. That team fight. If anyone hasn't seen it, it was in game four at around like 38 minutes, I want to say, maybe 35 minutes. Go watch
I
it.
think it was 34. Yeah, no, you're right. It's around 35, 34,
Yeah,
35. If you want to go check that one out, it's a must. It's a must see play.
yeah. Has a really nice flash over a skill shot and then QSS on a stun. It just really plays it beautifully. TL ends up picking up game four due to tacticals, kind of 1v9ing that game. But overall, this is a great series, and this gives me a lot of confidence in terms of the quality of teams that we are sending to Worlds. Because I think
Hmm.
FlyQuest and Team Liquid, yes, they have somewhat different strengths and weaknesses, but I think these are both two teams that I feel comfortable sending to Worlds, who I think can potentially make some waves in a group stage against. Hopefully they would get a decent group on maybe like a lower seeded Chinese or Korean or EU team.
Yeah, no, I tweeted out the same thing. Like these are two teams that I'm comfortable sending to Worlds, and it kind of seems like that every year, where you're like, you got two teams for sure, and then you're not too sure about the third one. It's kind of like wait and see. But anyways, you mentioned how you didn't really think there was anybody that really stood out as having a poor uh, performance over the series. I do agree. However, I do think, and this is like, I don't want to say he had a poor performance, but I wasn't too impressed with Broxa or Impact for that matter in the series. I think that a little bit of what we were afraid of from Broxa earlier in the split kind of crept back a little bit. And it's not, again, I need to be clear here. I don't think he had an awful series, but it did. You know what? It's kind of like he didn't stand out to me, which has kind of been the problem all split long. It's like if you're not standing out, that means you're not absolutely running it down, but you're not exactly making huge plays either. And like you can say the opposite for Santorin on the other side. This guy is everywhere in the jungle, getting so many advantages um, for his team. And I think that was one of the biggest differences in this series was the jungle diff. We know Santorin. We've been talking about how good Santorin is all year long, and he showed that in this series. One thing with FlyQuest specifically is this is a team that is not afraid to hit the go button. And we saw that in the series. So often did we see them engage nonstop. And I think that was what we didn't see out of Team Liquid. That was the difference in this series. I remember I don't remember what game. I want to say it was game three, maybe game four. I'm not sure, but there was a time where TL got a pick and I think they definitely had the chance to turn it into a team fight once they had the 5v4 advantage, and they chose not to do it. And that to me, like, I remember looking at that and I'm like, that's the reason FlyQuest is better right now. Because TL doesn't, like, they play too slow. And when it comes time for Worlds, that is my biggest worry with this Team Liquid squad is you don't get a lot of opportunities to punish at Worlds. And so when there is that opportunity, you need to pounce. And that's something FlyQuest did so much in this series. Even in game two, I mentioned earlier, game two, they were getting engages off. They couldn't kill Jensen. There were so many times Jensen lived with one or two
Yeah.
HP, and it was just a lack of being able to layer that CC. But you could tell that this team wasn't giving up on getting in there engaged. They draft to go hard engage, and they kept doing it. They just came up a little bit short in that game, but overall, really good series from Fly.
Yeah, like you said, their ability to just hit the go button and find these team fights and play it so well, just like all like collectively, just the way that it happens, the way the fights play out, their layering of CC, their use of like abilities and how interactions work with different champions. It's just really on point. I remember I'm thinking back to like the C9 days when they had Sven Skaren and C9's abilities to just Sven Skaren would make engages and Cloud9 be able to find fights out of nowhere and potentially you'd see them be down a couple K in terms of the gold and Sven Skaren might find that like super good engage which just creates an easy wipe for Cloud9, and that's what it's looking like right now for FlyQuest. PoE, whether he's on Azir or Santorin, whether or not he's on sort of some type of engage jungler, they like you said, they hit the go button and they all commit. They all know what they need to do. They know what their job is within the team fight, and they're just playing it super well. Multiple times in this series we saw FlyQuest be down in gold, down in dragons, maybe not super like far down, but like down maybe 3 to 4K, and they don't have any fear. Uh, they know, hey, we're gonna take this fight, we're gonna win this fight, and we're gonna win. I don't know. I
They
just
stick
think,
to the game
yeah,
plan, honestly.
exactly.
If you draft to engage, even if you're behind, you still drafted to engage, so you engage. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what they did.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that they had a really great performance overall. They could have had this series wrapped up in 3-1 if they end up winning that if that game 4 tactical 1v9 doesn't happen. But a really great series from FlyQuest.
I want to get your thoughts on because this series was really interesting. Some of the drafts for me. But I have a lot to say about it. So I want to get your thoughts on the draft on if you have any thoughts on the drafts before I go down this little rabbit hole myself.
Um, the main thing I know we meant you were talking a little bit about before was Broxa and how yes, he didn't really stand out, but he wasn't terrible, but he didn't stand out, and that's sort of a bit of the problem. Him being on Hecarim, I thought was a little bit interesting, as that's sort of that's not the play style that he's been like integrated in with this Team Liquid team. We've seen him a lot more on engagey type champions, whether it's been the Lee Sin as of late. I think his Lee Sin's been playing really well, but he got stuck on the Hecarim. I think it was 3 games this series, and Hecarim's is kind of like early game, mid game champion, and with TL's playstyle of taking the game super slow, we saw a lot of long games in this series, and Hecarim as a pick, it loses a lot of its power, past 30 to 35 minutes as you don't have that ability to be able to dive in and disrupt the back line enough, potentially, whether that's killing targets or, fearing targets away or breaking up a team fight, that champion loses a lot of its power, post 30 to 35 minutes. And we kind of saw that where, Broxa, was really only this like E and ult bot on Hecarim.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up the Hecarim because that was something that I had in mind. I loved their game one draft. When I saw the end of draft from game one, I'm thinking TL is five head. They got this game in the bag, and then it obviously didn't work out that way. But I loved the Shen Hecarim combo. We saw Cloud9 pull it out earlier this year, and that's probably where TL was probably like, hey, we got to try this. We got to try this one out. And they got Jensen on Akali. I've talked before on this show how often or how much I like Jensen playing the Akali. He's such a beast on these assassin champions like Akali and LeBlanc. So they got that on him, so he can go ham. The Shen works so good in this draft. And then they got Ashe and Blitz. And Ashe, you don't need to do anything special as long as you have that utility with the Shen Hecarim Akali. You don't need to have the Caitlyn or the Ezreal or the Senna. And then obviously Core JJ's Blitzcrank, right? It's been so good all split long. And then as the game went on and even after the game, it was very clear to me that FlyQuest just didn't even care that Core JJ was on Blitz. And that was the first time all split long that we've seen Core JJ not, well, I mean, honestly, he still had a good Blitz crank game, but it was the first time that we saw a team be able to play against it and really deal with it. And you even saw later in a later draft, I remember um, FlyQuest still went and picked up the set, knowing full well that Core JJ could pick the Blitzcrank into it, obviously because the counter that his ultimate does to the set shield. and they just didn't care. And so it blew my mind that someone who's been so good and that has been in talks with the MVP, and honestly, he's been so good specifically on the Blitzcrank, couldn't have the same effect that he's had in other games. So that was something that really stood out to me. And then game three. Sorry, go ahead. Did you have something you want to say
Yeah,
about that?
I was just gonna say like a lot of the power in terms of picking Blitzcrank is being able to control vision and then use your Blitzcrank to hide in these pockets of vision to prevent the enemy team from being able to step up and either get vision back themselves or take safe pass through the jungle. And you know in response, for the majority of teams, you have to either concede pockets of vision or play a lot farther back. But FlyQuest, like you said, wasn't really playing with that fear. They were playing with confidence and willing to fight for their vision, push Blitzcrank off of these pockets of vision, and they had a really good game one. And like you mentioned, it kind of was like the dream scenario of draft in terms of TL with Cordy J on
Yeah,
Blitz,
it
Jensen
seemed
on
like
Akali,
very good
and
prep.
Impact on Jensen.
Yeah, it seemed like very, very good prep, and I like that you bring up the Ash, how she can hawk shot, you can walk in because you have a bunch of vision, you can clear it all out, and the pressure just from having a Blitzcrank on the map alone allows you to control so much vision, and so that's just another reason why I thought the game one draft was so TL favored. But I did want to talk about game three because game three we saw them go with Kog'Maw, Zyra, Jin, and then Lee and Mord, where you're kind of beefy bruiser, so to speak. But I actually didn't like this draft out of TL because you got Kog'Maw, Zyra, and Jin against PoE's Azir. And as someone mentioned in the live chat here, Genats is in the live chat saying PoE beast. PoE was a freaking beast in this series. And I remember thinking, I said it even before it happened. I'm like, this Azir is going to destroy this Kog'Maw, Zyra, and Jin. There's too many targets and not enough peel for these squishy champions that I just knew that they were going to get punished. And sure enough, PoE was an absolute monster on this champion. I remember you got the 3-man scoop over in River. Really stepped up this series. I loved seeing PoE on Azir, and I don't really like seeing anybody on Azir normally, but him and Jensen's Azir is top tier, and I honestly thought that we were going to see the AP Cog out of PoE this series because of how much Jensen plays the Azir. But we actually saw that swapped around, and the AP Cog just got hard punished by not only just PoE, but Solo had an absolutely amazing GP game. He was dishing out damage in that one. And I think Solo, I was really happy to see him perform on. I don't want to say GP's a new champion, but let's be honest, we saw so much Mordekaiser and Shen and Set out of out of um, out of Solo that you kind of started to wonder if you were going to see anything else. Sure enough, we saw something else. We saw the GP, and it absolutely popped off and was so huge in this series.
Yeah, one thing that I really like about, and you mentioning PoE and Solo, is I feel like they're kind of changing the narrative on people's opinions of them, or like the opinions of the many in terms of, their play style and who they are as a player. Because PoE was always just looked at as this, he's this control mage player who plays all these niche picks, whether it's like a Nashor's Tooth Orianna or his Victor, or he has these kind of quirky picks, and he's only really known as this play safe control mage scale up kind of player. But he's really flourishing into one of the best mids in the league. I think if we were to like revote. In terms of like all pro voting, it'd be a lot closer at the top three in terms of Bjergsen, Jensen, and PoE. I think Niski's kind of out of that question now.
Yeah.
But PoE's really turning into a player that can play whatever he wants, feels comfortable on all these champions, and can play the engage role. We saw a ton in this series. PoE, as we mentioned before, FlyQuest willingness to hit the go button, PoE shuffling in, Flash Azir ulting, willing to put himself in positions of danger to get the good engages for the team. And same with Solo. I think, looking back to even last year, he was just known as this toxic solo queue player who, isn't very good, has a bit of a limited champion pool, and like you said, he's whipping out, different picks in these series, looking really good. Really playing well against the other top laners in this league, whether that was Licorice in the previous playoff series or Impact in this series.
Yeah, and another player I want to talk about is Turtle because, and it's not. I don't think Turtle's been the god in FlyQuest. I don't think he's been like amazing, but he has been good, man. And like it is such a turnaround from the turtle that was straight up just a liability, right? Like this guy used to be a liability. You couldn't really rely on him to not get caught out. But now, like, this guy is performing, man. And what I did used to think was that FlyQuest really needed to look for a new AD carry to perform on the world stage. And I don't know if I'm convinced of that anymore. I don't think that FlyQuest is going to pop off at Worlds. I do think that they still have their work cut out for them. But I used to think that they would just get absolutely stomped, and I don't feel that way anymore because they're pretty much just performing in every role pretty damn good. And it's crazy to see how some of these guys can just turn around their careers like that, and even how orgs can just turn around their org. But yeah, really, really good things for FlyQuest fans. They have something to be excited about heading into Worlds.
Yeah, I don't really want to knock Turtle or FlyQuest here, but one thing I think FlyQuest is really benefiting from at the current moment is the meta, and what champions are prevalent and what play styles are really good right now. I think Turtle, you know, I definitely think he's looking a lot better on your Caitlyn's, your Ashes, your Senna's, as opposed to your very, carry oriented champions in like a Zaya or a Kai'Sa or like a Vayne for whatever reason. But I think these champions fit a lot more of his play style and the way that he, plays with Ignar. And if Ignar is going to be playing some sort of roaming champion, they want to put Turtle on this Caitlyn or this Ezreal. And I I don't want to knock Turtle in saying that like he's getting benefits from the meta, but I think with the meta right now, and he's really taking advantage of it and performing really well because of it.
I think it's a fair criticism because we've seen Turtle struggle for so long in the league. Maybe struggle is also a little bit harsh, but I do think it is fair because he has had a small champion pool. Which was I remember thinking when he played the Jin in this series, I was a little bit nervous. I was like, we haven't seen him play anything outside of Ashe, Senna, or I guess Caitlyn in quite a while, right? So seeing him play the Jin was actually like really like kind of a relief because he was able to perform on it and he looked really good. So that was really good to see out of him.
I don't got too much more to say. Uh,
Yeah, I don't either. Two good teams. That's something that we could take from this series. Is we have two good teams at NA. Maybe not two amazing teams, but two good teams. And I don't think that they'll necessarily embarrass the North American region when they go to Worlds this year. But we still got a little bit of time before that. Let's talk about our pop off and bean soup. Let's hop over to that because we always have to give our prayers to the Lord King's Moo for blessing us with these pop off and bean soup choices. And I'm gonna go first this week. I normally have you start us off, but we need to talk a little bit more about tactical. Because this guy was absolutely tearing it up in that team fight, and just that team fight alone was the reason why I gave him the pop off award. Guys, this was an amazing play, and I remember thinking the series was over. They had to win a 3v5 team fight. I was like, there's no way they do this. And tactical, he almost wasn't even waiting for his other two bros to help him out. He was 1v5, never mind the 3v5. He went in, absolutely styled on them, and it didn't stop there. There was other team fights right after where he popped off as well. And to me, it was very obvious that they won that game because of tactical. So I had to give him pop off for that reason.
yeah, definitely a good one. For me, I went with FlyQuest team fighting. We were talking about it when we were discussing this series on how FlyQuest's ability to just hit the go button and play their team fights out so well. So kind of choosing, I guess, FlyQuest as a whole, but their team fighting in specific was really what I was enjoying to see there. I did want to give an honorable mention to Biofrost. I know I shouted him out a little bit in the TSM C9 series. Thought his recon play was super, super good. Just an honorable mention there.
Yeah, totally worth a mention. Absolutely. Who do you got for Bean Soup? Who really fucking disappointed you this week?
For Bean Soup, I gave it to C9's drafting. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but their over prioritization of set, picking B1 set 2 times in the series. And, one thing I touched on a little bit, but I want to talk about a little bit more was they're planning in draft with banning both Caitlyn and Shen on blue side because I touched on it a little bit, but these are two champions that are really highly prioritized in NA right now, and if you're not willing to leave these champions up, either trading them one for one, or you're not willing to pick these champions with your first pick on blue on B1, I think it's really poor. throughout the entirety of the playoffs, we saw Cloud9 banning Caitlyn. And Caitlyn is one of the best champions in the meta right now, specifically for bot lane. With this pick, you're able to always gain a ton of bot pressure, usually leading into early drakes for the bot side of the map. And, this is a champion that kind of fits right into the C9 playstyle when they were succeeding so much with gaining early bot pressure, being able to get win conditions through early drakes and pressuring the enemy team with souls. And then looking at it with Shen, it's a champion that Licorice has played and performed well on in the past. It's a very safe blind pick champion. There are only a few counters to it, one being the Lilia, another one being the Mordekaiser, and even then, they're kind of skill matchups. But I was really surprised, honestly, to see that C9 banning both Caitlyn and Shen on blue side, because I think these are two champions that you need to be playing right now in this meta. And if you're having to waste two bans on it, that's two other champions that you're having to give up to the enemy team, uh, whom you could be banning.
I like how you bring up specifically the lack of priority on Shen, just because not only is it a good pick right now, but it's a good C9 pick. We talked all year long about how Blabber and Niski want to go in and be aggressive. Shen works really well with that. And so to not prioritize that kind of seems a little weird. So I definitely agree. I think that is definitely disappointing and bean soup worthy. I actually also went with C9 for my bean soup. Of course, it's not a big surprise, right? When there was really just one team this weekend that looked bad, and it was C9. For me, it was their utilization of Galio. Again, I really don't like the Predator. Honestly, I don't think it's that great. I would prefer to see either Spellbook on it. I prefer kind of Spellbook just with how much C9 likes the team fight. But either that or the aftershock is fine. But the way I mentioned this earlier, I think the game plan seemed to have Niski TP in and flank. That didn't make sense to me when you have the set, and it's like if you're drafting this set, you're using that to engage, and so that to me was bean soup worthy. I really didn't like that either. So I know our bean soup awards are a little bit similar, but yeah, doesn't make a lot of sense
There's
to
not
me.
a lot
So
to choose from
yeah,
as well.
exactly. Not a lot to choose from, and definitely the thing that stood out the most, if you ask me. So that's where I gave my award. But we have some more games coming up this weekend, so let's get into those because we got TL and TSM coming up. This game, for those wondering, is on Saturday at 4 p.m. EST, 1 p.m. PST. And this one's going to be a little bit of a banger. We got a little bit of a throwback to the classic Bjergsen versus Jensen in playoffs. I'm really excited for this series.
Yeah, I think we're in for a good series. I think both of these teams, just looking at terms of coming into it and what teams are performing better, I think they're pretty much equal. It's hard to say. Um, it's really hard to give the edge to one team at the moment for me. I even think back to the final regular season game that TL and TSM had, which was a super super close game, kind of ended pretty randomly. And we saw a close game for the most part, and I think these two teams at the current moments are really evenly matched. Bjergsen's performing really well. Jensen is always solid as usual. But I think, the main things that I want to point out are tactical, and if he's able to perform against Doublelift, we have, Doublelift a bit of a revenge story here. If he's able to, take TL down, it'd be pretty surprising, honestly, to see TL going as the third seed, because I think this is another team that people
Yeah.
had pegged as potentially either the one or the two seed. So it could be pretty crazy if Doublelift is able to get his revenge against Team Liquid, sending them into the play-in tournament at Worlds.
Yeah, honestly, and that's something that needs to be highlighted, guys. The loser of this series has to play in play-ins, and we've seen time and time again teams can struggle to get through the play-in section. And wouldn't that just be the absolute heartbreak of all TSM fans? They've been waiting for 2 years. They missed Worlds. Finally, they're back at it. If they get knocked out in play-ins,
It'd be
that would just
embarrassing.
be the saddest thing. That would be really, really embarrassing for TSM and for TSM fans. So that's why this game matters so much, guys. For people that think the hype is kind of done and like NA doesn't really matter as much as Worlds matters. Maybe that's true, but these games matter a lot, and I promise you, neither one of these teams wants to play in play-ins. Um, what I'm looking for to see in this series is a little bit more from TSM, and I hate having to say this because it's like TSM's played so many games. how much more do you need to see? And it's like, I need to see more. And the reason why is because they didn't look good against Golden Guardians. I didn't think they looked amazing against Dig, but I mean, that was too hard to tell because Dig looked awful. And then they looked good against Golden Guardians. And then I don't know, I thought they looked good against C9, but and this is why this is the part that I hate about it is that C9 to me very clearly lost this series. And I
Hmm.
hate saying that, but they looked so bad. It's like if you're going to have confidence in a team, you want to see them beat a good team. And I think they did that against Golden Guardians, but they also got smacked by Golden Guardians not too long before that. So that's why I'm looking for a little bit more out of TSM. And again, I hate having to say that, but I mean, it's what I'm seeing, right? C9 did not look good. TSM punished everything they did, which is great. I want to see if TSM can punish the mistakes that TL makes, and I don't think there's a lot of them. So that's why I got TL taking this one.
Yeah, I think another thing to watch, which could be pretty pivotal in this series, is TSM's utilization of Broken Blade. I know in a lot of the games that TSM plays against C9, they like to play the carry versus carry in top lane. But I think in terms of playing against Team Liquid, you don't want to be running tank versus Impact, because I think Impact will always outperform any other top laner if they're in a tank v tank matchup. So I wonder if TSM is going to give Broken Blade the same resources that they did in the C9 series, with giving him counter pick and giving him resources early into the game to be able to create a lot of early game leads. But I think it's really close. It's kind of 50-50 for me, and honestly, I'm leaning on more of the Team Liquid side. I'm kind of in like a bit of a 3-2 here. I think we're in for a banger series, and you know, expect to see some long banger-ish games, some 40-minute bangers.
Yeah, well, that's one thing you get with TL playing anyone. TL versus Immortals, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
TL versus C9, 40 minutes. Anyways, I do actually um well, I agree with you in that I think TL is going to take it, but I disagree with you in that I don't think it's going to be a 3-2. I actually think it will be a 3-0. I do think TL is the
Oh.
better team. But like I said, I will be gladly proven wrong if we can see TSM step up and punish um, TL. We've talked about how clutch Bjergsen's been, man. This guy's been insane. And if there's someone that gets the playoff buff, we talked about TSM getting the playoff buff. It's Bjergsen getting the playoff buff. Okay, this guy's nuts. So this guy is really going to have to show how good his chiropractor is because he's going to have to put the team on his back and really have to carry this one.
Dude, that's been
Um,
like some meme on Twitter. People are saying like Bjergsen might have. I remember Flowers said that on the streams, like Bjergsen must have a good chiropractor.
it's true, man. This guy's carrying like so hard, and it's not even that the other TSM members are like the worst, but uh, they're definitely being carried by Bjergsen. And I like that you mentioned the top lane matchup. Impact has been best on tanks. Well, where has Broken Blade been best? Punishing tanks. So I think that's going to be a really important matchup in this series. And again, I think TSM wants to get Bio back on the Rakan. That I don't need to talk more about how good his Rakan was last week. It was good. Let's just say that. I think that getting him back on that pick will be really good, or even just on something else that he can engage with, because he clearly has the right idea of when they want to fight and when they don't want to fight. So I think that that's something TSM's really going to want. Um, I wouldn't, you know what I'm really hoping for in this series? I talked about the classic Jensen versus Bjergsen, but with LeBlanc and Akali being prominent right now, I want to see that matchup. You know, like I want to see uh, like hard carry versus hard carry, assassin versus assassin. The boys playing their picks that they both have insane win rates on. I don't care who's playing LeBlanc. I don't care who's playing Akali. I want the both of them to be on one or the other. And I think that would be what makes this series great.
Yeah, another thing that's interesting is both of these guys are Zillion players. Jensen and Bjergsen both have a
Yeah.
really good Zillion. It's a champion they're both known for. Bjergsen more so than Jensen, but I think
Yeah.
they both can play the champion really well. So I think it'll be interesting to see um, you know, the prioritization of Zillion, even if it is a prioritized pick. Maybe both of these teams feel like they don't want to give it up to another, so they choose to ban it. And if we see assassins uh, in LeBlanc and Akali, if the other one is going to pick Zillion in response to that, it's going to be super interesting. I'm really interested to see how these two teams draft specifically around the solo lanes.
I actually think that Speak is going to be a little bit more tested in this one. And the reason I say that is because there was already talks about how his champion pool was pretty small in the first place, and he doesn't play a lot. And then they clearly had the prep for the Evelyn, or like when playing with it or against it. I don't know if TL's going to let that Evelyn pick go by anymore, or without without either banning it or taking it themselves. And if TL does take the Evelyn, I don't think that they're going to be able to have the Zillion and the Skarner to be against it. So I actually think Spica is going to be put to the test with his champion pool in this series. Um, but with that said, I do think he's been looking really good for a rookie. I don't know if they're technically calling him a rookie or not anymore. I can't fucking keep track. But anyways, he to me he's a rookie, and so I think that he's been really really good. I'm really happy with his play, but I do think that he's got a much bigger test than the lackluster C9 that we saw this past weekend.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think Brock's he's a veteran jungler, and he won't give Spica any room to breathe if he's able to get a lead on him, and if he's playing some sort of aggressive champion.
And talking about Broxo, we need to see him bounce back.
Yeah.
No, again, not that he was awful. Well, actually, he kind of was. I don't want to say awful, but he there was two times in that series against FlyQuest where he got hooked by the Thresh in the same brush, and both of them led to some pretty big disadvantages. But I don't want to harp on that too much. I'm still looking for Broxa to bounce back because we did start to see the good Broxa in the Golden Guardian series. I thought he looked pretty good, and I want to see it more because he's been the one everyone's harping on all split long about how he's just not gelling well with TL. This would be a great time to prove that you are meshing well with the team. Like if not now, when? So really hoping to see him step up. And I kind of want to see him back on Lee Sin again. I think it's been his most played champion. I think it's been his best champion. Get back in there, start making some plays.
Hmm.
Yeah. Anything else on this one? I don't got too much more.
No. Last up, we got FlyQuest, sitting alone at the top of the playoff bracket. Them beating Team Liquid in the upper bracket means that they auto seed into the finals. And I think we're both of the opinion that this is definitely the team to beat right now in NA. We think they're the best overall team. They might not necessarily have the best players. They might not have the best individual players, but they're definitely greater than the sum of their parts. And I think this
Yeah.
is a team that, if they're on, they're on, and it's hard to stop them.
Yeah, and we were talking about if you're FlyQuest, if you're playing for FlyQuest, or if you're just a FlyQuest fan, who is it that you want to face? I'll let you pick that one first. Who do you think FlyQuest is wanting to play against in this series?
Definitely TSM. I think,
Yeah.
I remember I said last week, or not last week, the week before, but that C9 has FlyQuest number. But, opposite to that, FlyQuest kind of has TSM's number. I know their record against TSM, especially in recent times, is very good. I think they beat them both times in the regular season, and they match up really well. I think Bjergsen and PoE is a really good matchup. I think they'll both opt for sort of scaling mid picks, and Santorin's ability to, play these engaged tank junglers, I think is um, way more massive than Spica's contributions to TSM. But if I was FlyQuest, I definitely want TSM to win this series because, even though you did just beat Team Liquid 3-2, it was still a pretty close series for the most part. I
Hmm.
think, a couple of plays, a couple of team fights in this year, and we could have seen TL in the finals.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I did want to ask you first just because I didn't want to lead into it. But yeah, for me, it's pretty obvious that if I'm picking TL to 3-0 TSM, it's pretty obvious that I think FlyQuest wants to play TSM as well. With FlyQuest going to the finals and being the best team in North America right now, I do want to highlight some of a little bit of where they struggle and where whatever team that plays against them will look to punish. So one thing I will say that they do, we talked so many times this episode about their go button and how they like to hit it and they go. There are some times where they do force fights. Not very often, but they do have times where they force fights, and you need to be able to punish. And that's one of the things that I think either one of these teams will have to do. Another thing, Ignar wards very aggressively, which I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but he does ward aggressively. He is always in there by himself, getting that deep vision, and he does get picked off from time to time for it. And that is something that you can look to do if you draft a pick comp like TSM likes to do with the Twisted Fate. You can pick off Ignar when he's trying to get that deep vision and clear out his vision by himself. So that's another little weakness there. The other thing, and I mentioned this sort of with Solo not having played a lot, it's not that I think that he's got a small champion pool, but it's not that he's shown that he has a big champion pool. And so maybe I don't see that happening anytime soon because I think this meta you can't be banning out top lane, or I think you're just kind of griefing.
Hmm.
Um,
I agree.
but maybe at Worlds, the meta might shift around by that time, and maybe it's that time where he has to prove that he's got a bigger champion pool. I don't know, but those are the areas where I think FlyQuest does lack a little bit. With that said, I actually have them beating TSM or TL in the series coming up, regardless of who they play. I actually think FlyQuest will be our new champion in the LCS, which really would be crazy. It'd be so nice to see some new team finally step in and win. We've seen so many TL and TSM championships over the years, but any thoughts on what champions you want to see FlyQuest play in their upcoming series?
Definitely want to see PoE on Azir. I think Azir's
Ah,
been
I was hoping you'd say something else. Sorry, go on.
okay. Definitely want to see PoE on Azir. I'm liking the Ignar Thresh. I want to see Ignar on either Thresh or Rakan. I think those are his two best champions right now. I wonder, I wonder if, whatever team plays FlyQuest again, if they are going to attack Ignar's champion pool a little bit, because he has, for the most part, kind of exclusively been playing Thresh and Rakan.
Hmm.
So I want to see Ignar playing Thresh or Rakan. I want to see Turtle on some sort of safe farming utility AD pick, whether that's like Senna, Ashe, or maybe more of a DPS one in Caitlyn. And I just want to see Santorin and Solo on like some comfortable tank picks, or depending on matchups, if Solo wants to pick a GP into something like that. But I want to see them on their Orns, on their sets, on their Volibears, any of the above.
Yeah, honestly, with Santorin, it's like I want to see him on anything because he's been great
Hey, he's good at
on just
everything.
about anything. I like that you bring up the GP. Solo's GP was so good in the series that he just played against TL. I want to see more of it. The pick that I was hoping for you to say that I'm so
You
psyched
like
for,
Kog'Maw.
of course, I want the AP Cog, baby. I've been screaming about it. I think it's such a good pick. I think it's such a PoE pick as well, and the damage is just gross. I actually think that Jensen would have had a great game on the Cog had he had a peel tool from his teammates, but they didn't really draft it that way, so I don't think that he really got to shine with it. And so often I've said this whole split. I don't know why I defend AP Cog so much. I guess I just think it's an OP pick
It's
that
good.
isn't being utilized properly in North America because it has performed pretty poorly, honestly, for the most part. But I think that PoE is the right guy um, to pilot that kind of pick. So that's what I'm looking forward to see in the upcoming series. Do you think before we move on, I want to get your thoughts on: do you think FlyQuest just wins regardless of who they play, or if they're playing TL, do you think they TL bounces back, or TSM does TSM beat them? Who do you got? Don't give me a score line because I don't want to get too far if we don't know who they're playing. But do you think FlyQuest is the best team right now?
I definitely think they're the best team. In terms of whether or not they play TSM or TL, I think they definitely have a larger, there's a bigger gap against TSM and versus TL. I think it's like a maybe like a 55-45 kind of, whereas I think against TSM I have it more as like a 60 to 66, like a 40-33 kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think they definitely have advantages over both of these teams, TSM more so than TL.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I do think that it would be really, really close if they were to play TL. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for again, because I don't want finals to be a stomp, but whoever makes it to finals, I just want to see 5 games. That's always what I'm looking for. Silver Scrapes is so freaking hype when it comes to these playoff series. But nonetheless, we will be sending out our predictions on Twitter. Obviously, we're not going to predict score lines now because that just seems to get a little bit too deep into the predictions when we don't know who they're playing against yet. But that game is on Sunday. So obviously TL and TSM is on Saturday, and then on Sunday that's when FlyQuest will play the winner of that series in the finals. That's going to be Sunday, 4 p.m. EST, 1 p.m. PST. I think regardless, it's going to be a good series. So be sure not to miss that.
Hmm.
You want to pull up the bets going into this week? What kind of lines we're looking at?
Pretty, not too much. We only got one series that bets are available for right now,
One
because one is
guaranteed
still
series,
to
of
be
course.
determined.
Right. And I honestly I actually like Liquid in this one. I mentioned how I think they're gonna 3-0. I do think they are the better team. I don't know if I want to take the minus 1.5 games to get the 2.5 one odds there. It's a lot safer to just take the 50 cents on your dollar bet for taking liquid. But I have been considering. I haven't made up my mind yet. I will be taking liquid. I just don't know if I'm taking them to cover an extra game or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for me it'd be pretty hard to bet on either one of these teams because I think, there's not, for me at least, there's not like a clear-cut favorite. I think it's
Yeah,
very close either way. Sure, you can maybe give Liquid a slight edge, but overall I think it's very close.
and I would say to people, if you're convinced that this is a 50-50 series, then I would take TSM. Obviously, the 2.45 is good odds there. Um, However, I'm just not convinced that TSM is going to win this series, so that's why I'm not going to personally recommend that one. I also don't like the over. You see over 4.5 games, so obviously, if it goes to 5 games, you could take the 2.7 there, but to me, I don't see this one going Silver Scrapes as much as I would love it to. I don't see it happening, but yeah, there's not too much else. I really, honestly, overall, I actually don't like too many of the bets going in this week. But again, if I were to take one, it would be TL to cover an extra game, or just TL to just straight up win the series.
All right, last up for our last topic, we have a quick MVP prediction. They've been rolling out the LCS awards on a weekly basis for the last couple of weeks, and the last one that we got is MVP. Not surprising to the majority of people listening if you've been listening, but I'm going with Core JJ. This guy's a beast. I know Bjergsen's been on the come up for the last little while, but take into consideration that this is only part of the regular season. This doesn't
Yeah,
include playoffs, so I think looking at the season as a whole, Core JJ has been performing at a top level for the entirety of the season. Where yes, Bjergsen may be performing better at the end, but Core JJ has had a um, much more consistently good performances for the entirety of the year. I think this guy is a carry support player. Yes, I said that he carries on support champions like his
yeah, for sure.
Blitzcrank, like his Bard. He's a beast.
His Bard is well, honestly, I don't even. They're all so good. He even looked really good in the Lux that he played this past weekend.
Hmm.
But honestly, but my point is, you could just put this guy on anyone, and he will perform. Obviously, like you said, if anybody's been listening, it's no different for me. I think that Core JJ is the best player in this league right now. I could see the argument of Bjergsen just with how good and clutch he is in playoffs. Absolutely. But again, this is a regular season award, and for me, it seemed, yeah, I guess I'll say it seemed obvious to me that it was Core JJ. So we'll see. I know there was a lot of people that were really pulling for Bjergsen because of how good he looked, specifically in the second half of the season. But we'll have to wait and see. That'll be announced this weekend as well. Some other
On
quick
Friday, I
things.
believe, by the
Oh,
way.
okay. Yeah, and speaking of Friday, just some other quick little news. Just want to share with you guys some little bit before we close out the show here. On Friday, they are planning a show match, and they're doing Sneaky and Meteos are the captains of their teams. That's going to be Friday night, 9 p.m. EST, 6 p.m. PST. And the rosters are so Sneaky's team is obviously Sneaky, Smoothie, Pobelter, Xmithy, and Voyboy stepping in. And then on the other side, we got Meteos, Afromu, Apollo, Demonte, and your boy Dyrus is coming back to play another game. I
Yikes.
think this will be fun. Yeah, I think it'll be a fun series, right? And that's all it's meant to be. It's supposed to be a for fun series. It's not meant to be anything serious. We did see there was a lot of viewers for the show match they did earlier this split where they did TSM versus C9 earlier. So
TSM
I'm
plus
expecting,
Voyboy.
yeah, true. I am expecting a pretty decent turnout here as far as viewers for a game that really doesn't mean anything. I think it'll be a little bit of fun. And then one other quick noteworthy thing that I think people will want to know is that it got announced on Reddit that Vietnam will not be participating at Worlds this year due to coronavirus. Now, I don't know why Vietnam is different than any other region. I would have to assume that they don't have the whole coronavirus on lockdown. I don't get it though, because it's not like here in North America we're killing it with corona. But regardless, it looks like for that reason, Vietnam isn't going to be at Worlds. This was just as a Reddit source. Now, in the Reddit post, there was a source. However, I can't read Vietnamese, so I can't confirm this. But it is something that, even though it's just maybe it's a rumor, I guess, because it's only Reddit. I did want to share it with our listeners, so that they aren't surprised if Vietnam doesn't show up to Worlds this year. But again, we're not 100% sure on that, so just be aware of that.
Yeah, I wonder what implications this has for the world's groupings in terms of like the seeding, because I know that Vietnam, due to their performances at international events over the last this got introduced at the previous World Championship, I believe, but due to their good performances at international competition, they have the first seeded team from the VCS, VCS being the Vietnamese League, gets put into Pool 2 of the World's group draws.
You want a
So,
plot twist?
what?
I got a plot twist for you. C9 is going to Worlds as North America's fourth seed.
That happened, I'd be happy, but I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think so
I
either,
think
but
that maybe they
wouldn't
would
that
just.
be whack?
Yeah, that would be whack. I mean, maybe like they get joined in as like an extra play-in team or something like that, and
Korea and North America get a random last minute fourth seed. Cloud9's
that's
going to Worlds. Not all hope is lost.
I'd be glad because then we get another Korean team. I think the Korean teams are going to be all good. SKT need an extra spot, so SKT can get in, or T1,
There's your
sorry.
plot twist, folks. Spread the news,
I'm
spread the
down with it.
rumors.
I'm
This is
down.
a good rumor to start spreading. Yeah, it's not real, but this would be a good one to spread.
Yeah.
That Cloud9 is in fact going to the Worlds. That would be a really funny rumor to get going. But that's going to be it for us. Thank you everyone who showed up to the live show, and thank you to all of our viewers. Some pretty good viewership on YouTube specifically this past weekend. I didn't check our other platforms, but just want to thank all you guys for supporting our channel and our podcast. This is something we really enjoy doing, and we really hope that you guys enjoy doing it too. As per usual, always check out our socials. We've been a little bit more active on Twitter. I keep saying this every week. We're going to continue to be more active on Twitter. So go follow. If you're listening, it's at Toominator. That's spelled TOOMINATOR underscore, and at BlueJ underscore GG. If you can't spell Blue Jay, well, we got bigger problems than Twitter. But
Okay.
that's gonna be it for us. Be sure to like and sub on YouTube if you are watching there. Thanks again, everyone, for showing up. Anything else, J and T, before we close her out?
Nope.
All right, that's gonna be it for us. We'll see you guys same time next week, 9 p.m. EST on Twitch for the live show. This has been episode 13 of the Clown Fiesta podcast.